Hi there, and welcome back to Cyburst, a podcast about science, popular culture, and entertainment. We're your hosts, Isabel
and Ella, and we are two science communicators and sci-fi nerds steering this spaceship once more into the multiverse of fun in science. And today's episode is like a warm hug.
Yes.
Today's episode, the magic of trees, how they communicate and why we connect with them so much, especially in literary fiction.
This is going to be a really good episode. As always, we're going to start by jumping into some recommendations. But before that, it's really important that we acknowledge that this episode is being recorded on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. Indigenous Australians are the first scientists and artists, and we'd like to pay our respects to elders past, present, emerging, and future. So Ella, what culture snap do you have for us today?
Yeah, I have an album that I am super excited about. It's called Sonder by Dermot Kennedy, who is an Irish singer-songwriter.
Oh, okay.
It is a gorgeous album, very poetic, kind of whimsical, kind of magical. You'll see later, audience, that this very much kind of relates to themes of today.
Is it like folky, like folklore kind of?
Kind of folky, kind of like acoustic rock, if such a genre were to be labeled. It's a really special album to me. I waited ages for my copy to arrive, and I was lucky enough to be in one of the first crowds he played like the single from the album too, right after COVID. There is this gorgeous song in it called Blossom, and the bridge goes, "If ever there's a summer when we just can't be together, there'll be half of me where light's not getting in. I'll see the photo I took of you with the blossom tree above you, and I'll just be glad I loved you like I did."
Aww.
It's so sweet, so special. The album title, Sonder, is a word whose meaning is the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and as complex as your own.
Oh.
And I think after today's episode, we're going to be feeling that about trees.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, just taking in all their vivid complexities and magic.
Oh my God, I have to go listen to this now.
Absolutely do. But I really want to listen to your culture snap.
Yeah, so funny that we kind of both brought poems today. Mine is not a song, but it turns out my great-grandfather was a poet.
Amazing.
And recently, literally as we were like starting to plan for this episode, my grandma found one of his old poems, and it's about trees. Because the name, so his name was Kenneth Tolhurst, and the surname Tolhurst, it's not a very common surname, but it actually translates to, in Old English, tall trees.
Whoa.
So my family actually has a deep connection with trees.
I love that so much.
Yeah, so I want to read the poem for you.
Please do, yeah.
It's actually an acrostic poem, which it won't come through the way I'm reading it, but you should be able to find it somewhere. I'm sure if you want to see what it looks like acrostically. Tall trees. Tall trees arch through the sunlight, over the orange-yellow road, swaying, loving each other, leaves entwined, hands touching through long fingers. Up, 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 along their slender branches. Rippling across the moving tops, sighing silently, saying, "We are here to make a place to walk through." It's beautiful, isn't it?
So magical, whimsical, loving, warm.
Yep, so relevant to today's episode.
So this was made for this book, for this topic, for this episode. Everything in the universe is just aligned perfectly for us to be here in this room today.
It was a sign. Speaking of today's topic.
Yes.
Trees. Trees and plants are obviously very important to us
Yeah.
because they produce oxygen, which we need to live.
Absolutely we do. Love oxygen, big fan.
And I think we seem to be naturally drawn to trees. I don't know if you feel this way, but every time I see trees, I feel like an urge to go over to them and touch them and hug them. And
Yeah, it's kind of like overwhelming, I don't know, connection.
yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely feels like we have a deep rooted
Rooted.
pun
Oh, no.
pun intended, I think.
Pun intended.
Connection to them. And there are current debates in Western science and Western literature about their level of sentience and whether they feel pain and so on, because traditionally we sort of think, oh, it's a plant, it's a like non-moving thing.
Yeah, so it ranks low in our like our ethical considerations.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about Peter Wohleben's book.
Yeah. The Hidden Life of Trees.
Oh my God, this book is so special.
So
I think.
special. So gorgeous, so well written, so crafted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the author Wohlleben is a German forest scientist and author who writes about ecological themes in popular language and popular culture. And the book, The Hidden Life of Trees, was, I believe, originally written in German.
Yeah.
But I think it had so much of an impact that they translated it into English.
So many languages.
And other languages,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. So the book basically details how trees nurture and talk to each other, how they feel and live in social networks.
Yeah.
And it's all backed by the latest scientific research and his own personal experiences caring for forests.
Which are very deep and overarching, I guess. Like his experiences aren't just like he walks in forest. Like that was his job, his life, his passion.
Yeah,
for so long.
exactly. So he spends way more time in forests than like we do.
Yeah, and we can now all benefit from that experience because this beautiful work of art.
And the foreword in the English version is by Tim Flannery, who is a Aussie paleontologist, environmentalist, and science communicator.
Hell yeah!
And he couldn't have put it better.
The introduction in this foreword,
Yeah.
life-changing.
So I want to read a little passage from it, which I think sums up the book so well.
And I think this is one of my favorite parts of the entire book.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
We read in fairy tales of trees with human faces, trees that can talk and sometimes walk. This enchanted forest is the kind of place I feel sure that Peter Wohlleben inhabits. His deep understanding of the lives of trees, reached through decades of careful observation and study, reveals a world so astonishing that if you read his book, I believe that forests will become magical places for you too. Opening this book, you are about to enter a wonderland. 100%.
Shivers everywhere.
I think you're about to enter a wonderland listening to this episode too, by the way.
Yeah, we're going to take that suggestion of reading fairy tales and go so far into that, talking about, literary works where we saw this and have seen this throughout our lives.
Yeah. Personally, and I reckon it's going to be the same for Ella once you finish the book, it had a very profound impact on me. And I came out of it convinced that trees have a high level of consciousness than what we initially think, and what is initially attributed to them in Western literature. And that us humans actually have a lot in common with them, that we are more similar to them than we are different.
I feel like you're talking about almost like that realization of Sonder for trees, which is really fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's so joyous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually kept a diary reading this book too. Like that's how big of an impact it was having on me, because I wanted to record how I was feeling reading it. And I wanted to share some of my favorite parts, which are all like scientific too.
Hell yeah. Let's go.
So the first one is beech trees are capable of friendship and go so far as to actually feed each other.
Amazing.
Okay, here's the thing. they also synchronize their photosynthesis so that they're all equally successful and they're not competing against each other.
I love the dismantling of the survival of the fittest conception, because friendships and communities in trees and people show that that's not necessarily how it has to be. And I am so in love with that working out and being functional. It's amazing.
I'm just in love with trees. Oh, the other thing, trees communicate using scent, visual and electrical signals, and possibly even sound.
The sound one kind of freaks me out.
Yeah, it does a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So trees like fruit trees, willows, chestnuts, they use scent to attract bees. So scent is not, like, nice smelling trees is not a random thing.
It's all planned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now the sound, going back to the sound thing, there are actually now some serious experiments on crackling roots and that actually having meaning and not just being random either.
Yeah, I literally just read the sentence in the book, I'm not very far into it, about trees screaming when they're thirsty.
Yes.
And that cracking or crackling roots could be like another version of that.
Yes.
And that's horrifying and makes me just want to go and water like every single tree ever.
The poor trees.
They're just little guys.
I know. I was very like taken aback by that point. So they found from a recent experiment that when seedling roots are exposed to crackling at 220 hertz, they also orient their tips in that direction. So that means they're changing their behavior based on vibrations and sound. So they're actually registering it. How crazy is
Phenomenal, honestly.
Oh, yeah, cries of thirst was another point I had there, which we just talked about, which some people think is also a mechanical thing. But then if you think about how we cry out in pain, the passage of air going down the windpipe causes our vocal cords to vibrate. So it's not like that dissimilar.
Yeah, it can be mechanical and emotional too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other one is a sense of time. Trees having a sense of time.
I love all of this.
Which is why when we've experienced warm spells in winter months, the trees don't green up because they know, oh, a certain number of days hasn't passed yet, so I'm not going to like green.
It's not time for me yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, my final one is learning and memory.
Which is, I think, probably one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
So species like oaks and beeches, which are native to the northern hemisphere, adapt to reverse cycles in the southern hemisphere if they're exported and planted here. This means they remember that rising temperatures means spring and falling temperatures means autumn.
Yeah. So not only can trees, remember the passage of time, but they can also then, I don't know, change that perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
To what is most helpful for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How cool are trees?
Trees are so cool. And I think they only get cooler the more we look into them and the more we think about them and the more we study them.
So that's sort of the latest scientific research around it. But trees are a massive symbol in pop culture.
Yeah. Yeah. And before we dive in, I guess I kind of wanted to do a bigger, wider, I think less deep introduction to trees. Starting off with, I kind of like dived into Encyclopedia Britannica, which is, I think, a very accessible source for a lot of us.
Oh, totally.
I think it's kind of, the first thing you start to look at maybe in primary school when teachers are like, don't go to Wikipedia.
Yeah. Okay, let's side rant for a second. Wikipedia is useful, everybody. If your teacher has told you, don't go to Wikipedia, it's unreliable, it's actually really helpful as a starting point.
Yeah, it's a great starting point. Though for like younger audiences, written a bit confusingly.
Yep.
Whereas, Encyclopedia Britannica, a bit more straightforward. So we know that a majority of the Earth's terrestrial, like ground biomass, is represented by trees.
Yep.
trees are a huge part of our ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
They have a massive, massive entry here, and also in any other place that tries to talk about them. There is so much to cover on trees that I haven't found like a paper that can give like a proper introduction. It's only ever like on one side of it, which I think is crazy. This quote though from Encyclopedia Britannica really kind of made me giggle, which is from both a taxonomic and a phylogenetic perspective, the tree is an artificial category.
As in they don't exist? What?
Yeah, as in trees are recognized kind of as a natural construct. But they are like genetically not as tied together as our distinction visually is. So we see something that is tall, has a single wooded stem, which, you know, a tree trunk, and then has supporting structures, branches coming off of it, and we think tree. But there is little distinction kind of if you went to like other forms of noting variation and distinctions between species, between like shrubs and trees, and even trees and ferns. There are tree ferns that kind of ray up that whole area. Yeah, so I guess the kind of two ways to look at it is one, that we see something that we think looks like a tree and humans say tree, and science has just realized that that's such an important classification that the word still exists and still is used. And there are more specific terms that if you go into like papers like angiosperms or whatever, that they'll go down. But I love that the recognition of this category of trees is still here, and that also trees could just represent an adaptive strategy by many different like species to exploit and dominate the habitat above ground, which I think is a less nice way of looking at it than in Peter's book, exploiting and dominating the habitat above ground, when really what this is like building community and strengthening each other.
But also a lot of it happens underground.
Yeah. So it's a bit surface level, you could say, this definition.
That's another great one.
And I also did some reading into kind of like other latest science that isn't communication based for trees.
Yeah.
And I found this paper talking how that trees and forests should be protected, managed, and planted, at least in part, for their role in sustaining atmospheric water and all that depends on it. And this paper goes on to detail how there is so much more to do in this space for our understanding of how trees help with the cycle of water on our planet.
Yeah, you know what? Trees is one of those things where they're so incredibly important and very like visible to us, but we know actually barely anything.
Yeah. And I'd love to know more. And I think part of this podcast and part of the joy and delight of it has been finding out more in little areas.
Totally. I remember, I think at one point he goes into, in the hidden life of trees, how we're not actually sure how water moves through the trees.
We just don't know.
Like what? You would think we would know that by now.
We've been to space. We don't know how water moves in trees.
Well, the other interesting point he makes is that, you know that saying about how we know more about outer space than we do about deep sea?
Yeah.
If that's the case, then we know even less about what happens in soil and root systems.
Crazy.
Mind blown.
Mind blowing. Just to go back to that earlier thought about, you know, trees being so visual and we love them, we have this recognition of them. I think this is super why trees pop up time and time again in popular culture, all the way from, you know, children's media right the way through to horror.
Yeah, totally.
Like for adults over 18, watch at your own risks. Trees are both delightful, joy-bringing, align with stories of growth, but they also can show like decay.
Yeah.
They're gorgeous. And we had this thought that I really wanted to share about when you're reading books about trees, is that it is a meta experience.
Yeah.
As the books you're reading, the physicality of reading, the way you turn the paper, the interactivity with this. Books are paper, are trees.
Yes.
So for trees to be represented in books so often makes so much sense because this physical linkage, and it's like a natural symbol of knowledge. And I've just finished a chapter on tree school in the book.
I remember that chapter.
And I really like these associations of books with knowledge with trees.
Yeah.
because it does seem from a lot of the most recent information we have about trees is that they do store and hold and learn
Mm-hmm.
and are beings of knowledge that we are yet to understand.
Yeah.
So
Oh my
exciting.
God. Yeah. So it's just all of these reasons we've just talked about. Again, it's no surprise that trees are such a big symbol.
Mm. And I guess that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, totally. So obviously it's a big symbol in science.
Yes.
It's used as a metaphor or as to like represent science concepts. So like the tree of life, the evolutionary tree of life, for
Yeah, like
instance.
phylogenetic trees. So
Yeah.
how different species are connected to each other from like a greater genus classification.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But also in pop culture,
Yes.
particularly fiction books
Absolutely.
and fantasy as well. It's really
Huge
big in
player
fantasy.
fantasy.
And we haven't talked as much about books in our episodes so far.
Which
as
is crazy considering how big book nerds we are.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's easy to just give movies as examples because it's a like thing, 90 minutes to go watch this thing and then you can understand what we're talking about.
Yeah. Whereas like Isabel has kept a diary reading
Yeah.
Peter Wohleben's book, so
Mm-hmm.
different levels of connection.
So we see trees as symbols in fiction represented in multiple different ways.
Yeah, and we've categorized kind of a few to help us dive in.
Yeah, so the first one we're going to talk about is anthropomorphism of trees. And I wanted to quickly go back to Wohlleben for a minute and how he continually reinforces trees' similarities with humans, which I sort of touched on before. I'll give some examples. A tree contains almost as much liquid inside itself as humans.
Whoa.
Yeah.
And we don't know how it moves.
No.
Ah.
Bark is like skin.
Mm-hmm.
It protects the tree's inner components, and without it, a tree would dry out. Attacks by bark flies can leave a tree with permanently rough exterior with like thousands of tiny pits and pustules, similar to lifelong acne scars. If we know trees can learn, then the root system may be similar to a brain.
Stop it.
Yeah,
No,
because there has to be
really cool.
Well, there has to be some kind of storage system. So that's where how they think it's happening.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Forests also sweat, quote unquote, for the same reasons as us and with the same results.
Yeah.
Leaves are kind of like lungs. They have narrow slits that look like teeny tiny mouths, which trees use to breathe in carbon dioxide and breathe out oxygen.
Yeah. All of this without even going into how, like, you know, physically trees can look like they have faces, and that's like a whole anthropomorphic thing on its own as well.
Yeah. So let's talk about some examples of anthropomorphized trees in fiction.
Yeah.
The one that comes to my mind first was Lord of the Rings. Trees are massive in Lord of the Rings. There's an entire really long Wikipedia page just on trees and forests in Middle-earth. Like, I'm not even kidding. It's gigantic. And that's partly because the author Tolkien has been described as environmentalist and that trees provide a vehicle for his eco-criticism. So trees and forests play lots of different roles in Middle-earth tales and are often prominent characters in the plot, like Ents. So Ents are the sentient, strong, powerful, tree-like creatures whose punches can, quote, crumple iron like tin, and they can tear apart solid rock like bread crusts. You don't want to mess with them.
So terrifying.
But they're actually really wonderful, caring creatures. They're called the shepherds of the trees because they protect forests from orcs.
I want to be a tree shepherd.
Interestingly, ants were always sentient beings, but didn't learn how to talk until the elves taught them how. Is this our cue to teach trees how to talk?
Interesting, because if we come at it from the perspective that we currently have, is that trees didn't need to talk the same way that like humans or fictional elves need to, because they have their own methods of communication.
Ooh. So Treebeard might be the one, if you're listening, the one you might be the most familiar with, especially if you've seen the Lord of the Rings film adaptations, the Peter Jackson ones. He's the really old wise one, and the main character who Merrin and Pippi the main Ent who Merry and Pippin interact with. And he has that famous quote, "We never say anything unless it's worth taking a long time to say."
Words to live by. Words to live by.
And another interesting thing about ants is that they actually eventually settle down in one place and grow roots and leaves and cease conscious thought. So they just become like regular trees.
That is really beautiful.
Yeah. I love Tolkien.
I'd like to just settle down at the end of my human consciousness
Like
and
just
become
decide.
a tree.
Yeah. You just like, yeah, I'm ready to just be a tree.
And here is a very nice place amongst all my other tree friends. And our roots will commingle and we will share messages through our electric impulses and we'll be friends for forever.
And I wanted to link all of this back to Wohleben's concept of trees as slow-moving beings, because I think ants reflect that idea very well. Trees are actually really active, and we just don't see it because the activity happens over a really long period of time.
Because trees are alive for a really long period
Exactly.
of time.
So
it's all in scale.
So they don't need to do it really fast. They can take their time. And there's a quote from the book here that says, "What we see is always a brief snapshot of a landscape that only seems to be standing still. The illusion is almost perfect in the forest because trees are amongst the slowest moving beings with which we share our world, and changes in the natural forest are observable only over the course of many human generations."
Okay, but the words "slowest moving beings with which we share our world."
Yeah, I know.
This is like perspective shifting, mind altering language. It's stunning. I love it.
Oh,
I
totally.
would love to learn German to read it in its original
Same.
form rather than the
Actually,
translation.
it would be really interesting to compare. Maybe we need to find a German friend to read the German version and tell us.
3 years on Duolingo, I could do it.
The other sort of big anthropomorphized tree in pop culture at the moment is Groot.
Yes. First thoughts I think we had were like, oh, Groot.
So Groot is the tree from Guardians of the Galaxy, who's a member of an alien race of humanoid trees with superpowers like plasticity, superhuman strength, regeneration. So I see Groot as a symbol of growth and rebirth. And trees can be very resilient beings.
Yeah, they can come back from disease through their own will, through support of others.
Yeah. So similar to how Rocket Raccoon grows a baby Groot from a small piece of twig. Plants can actually regenerate from tiny fragments. So, for example, Kogan grass, I think is how you say it, can regrow from as little as 1/10 of a gram. That's teeny tiny.
Oh, to be Kogan grass.
The only difference is the regeneration time scale. So Groot can grow limbs really fast, but a tree would actually take a very long time to do that.
Trees from space. I do think it's a really, really prominent image in popular culture right now. Is Groot as the humanoid tree alien that I think has a lot more similarities with superpowers, quote unquote, of normal trees than we would realize.
Yeah, I think so. And speaking of trees as a symbol of growth,
Let's
Ella's
get
got
to
a-
that as a topic.
yeah, Ella's got another good example of that.
Yeah. So my first literary thought when we decided on the subject was talking about the Magic Faraway Tree series by Enid Blyton. The first one of which, The Enchanted Wood, published in 1939.
Mm-hmm.
Staples of my childhood. I grew up reading them and a lot of other Enid Blyton books. And, these are stories of children growing up, adventuring together, learning together. They make a lot of mistakes. A lot of silly things happen. A lot of fun things happen. And I really love how at the center of this one, we have this gorgeous, huge tree whose top disappears into the clouds and kind of like catches a magical land every day. Just the image of walking into a forest and a tree being so tall you can't see the top of it
Yeah.
has always enchanted me.
Mm.
One of my favorite little tiny features of the story is that when you walk into this magical forest, instead of the normal rustling sounds that trees make, with their leaves, you hear them go wisha, wisha, wisha. So they're like whispering their secrets. If only you stopped and could listen to them and translate them.
Cute. It's like the crackling roots and us trying to figure out what that means.
Yeah, it's I think without painting trees and forests as intelligent, Enid Blyton suggests it, or lets you think it, and I enjoy that very much. I wanted to talk about the folk of the faraway tree, and there's this plot point in the third book where troll thieves are cutting into the roots of the faraway tree, and that's causing it to die because the roots are essential for trees. And the children kind of like come together with all of their friends and their community that they've made and grown with over the course of these 3 books. And they help to save the tree, which is, I think, such a gorgeous plot resolution because kind of for the entire series, they're using the tree. They're using it to climb up. Everyone who they're friends with, they all live in the tree. They've got like their different houses. The kids are really good at climbing. The tree gives them magical fruits that they eat. Like it just has different fruits available at different points in time. It's fantasy. The tree can do whatever it wants to do. It provides them adventure, it provides them escape, it provides them friends. Yeah. And at the end they come together to save the tree, and I think that's really gorgeous.
Yeah, it's giving back.
Yeah, and I think in a sense that is one of the best things of growing is like learning to give back to a community that has helped you to grow.
Yeah.
And I really loved the idea of growing up as children, not in a sense of you're growing up from children to teenagers to adolescents, just like growing for the sake of growing and developing and becoming friendlier people. Like some of the characters start as not very nice, and they, through all this exposure and trial and adventure, learn to be better people. And I think that's really, really gorgeous. And it's all because of this tree in the forest they live nearby.
Wow.
Yeah.
Damn. I never really thought about magical faraway tree in that way before, because I don't think it was as big in my childhood as it was in yours. I remember watching I think there was a TV show or something.
Whoa, I have not seen that.
Or maybe it was a movie. I'm not sure.
I think there was a movie made, but I don't know if I've seen it.
I don't know. I remember watching segments of faraway tree stuff in primary school. But no, that's so wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, I kind of want to go back and reread them all now.
I feel like I have to read them now.
If we never record another podcast episode, it's because we've dived back into way too many books after recording this one.
Well, I have read Enid Blyton before, just not that series. Another way in trees are represented in pop culture is as connection.
Yeah.
So a really big one at the moment is Avatar.
Especially with the release of the second film.
Exactly. And I think this is a great example. So the home trees connect the souls of the Na'vi, which are the blue people, with all living things on the planet. And Awa, who's sort of their deity, their all-mother, great-mother, is a biological sentient guiding force of life and neural network embodied in plants, animals, and particularly ancient trees. So through one called the Tree of Voices, the voices of ancestors can be heard by neural cue, which is the little appendage they have hidden under. In the Navis, the appendage they have that's hidden under a layer of hair that like connects to everything. When that's in contact with the tree, they can hear the voice of ancestors. And the Tree of Souls can connect directly to the human nervous system by physical contact with root fibers, despite humans lacking a neural cue. So there's a few different ways that you can experience the connection.
Yeah, it's really interesting, kind of like as a form of knowledge sharing that isn't from those currently living.
Yeah.
It's like stored and kind of like in this, Tree of Voices, it kind of feels like a library of others' knowledge and others' thoughts and perspectives.
So I think this is exploring the concept in forest science of, I love this phrase, the wood wide web.
Which is a really well-known and used phrase, which is delightful.
So that's where the phrase they use to describe how trees exchange information through interconnected root systems and fungi, sort of like underground telephone wires.
Amazing.
And I love this. Wohlleben himself has actually weighed in on the portrayal of trees and connection in Avatar.
That's so cool.
And has said this: I think James Cameron has read the scientific papers very well and implemented some things into his story which I think are very good. Yes, there is a network in the underground. We don't know how far it reaches, but I'll give one example. We know that oak trees and beech trees arrange together to bloom in 1 year to produce a lot of acorns or seeds, and perhaps the next 2, 3, 4 years not to bloom, to bring down the planet-eating mammal population. There is communication over hundreds of kilometers, which is proven. What we don't know so far is how trees are doing this.
Whoa, I can't believe our guy weighed in on this.
I know. That was late last year as well. So, and when did the second Avatar come out? Was it end of last year?
The summer, I think.
Yeah. So it was around the time. There you go.
There we go. So we've got, that was trees' connection. We talked about trees' growth and also anthropomorphic trees.
Yeah.
We're going to go now into trees as transition, and how they can, kind of be the start of something else by ending something. A very literal version of this is going into Peter Pan, Pixie Hollow, Tinkerbell. We've got in Peter Pan the Hangman's Hideout, which is kind of like the hideout for the Lost Boys, and there were lots of associations with secret doors and magic, and Peter Pan as a story itself is all about not wanting that transition from child to adulthood.
Yeah.
It's all about staying as the boy who never grew up. And it's really interesting to me that the hideout that the adult Captain Cook can never come into, there's a series of like hidden trapdoors, normal doors. It's kind of like things blended into the forest. I think that's really cool. And I also like how there is kind of like this mischievous magic associated with it.
Yeah.
Like an adult could find a door, but there is kind of like this meddlesome nature of kids and this mischievousness that adults are missing, so they can't come in, they can't transition back as well. And there's a whole bunch of great Peter Pan adaptations, such as Pan, about adult Pan realizing that to go back to childhood would be a great thing, and he isn't allowing himself to, so he like dreams up kind of like this reverse Peter Pan situation.
Wow, is that what the movie is about? Because I haven't seen it. I just heard of it.
I only watched it for the first time recently, and I was really confused for a while because it was not the Peter Pan story that I knew and loved. The book is so much more different to the Disney adaptation, so much more different to any other versions. My favorite thing about the Disney adaptation is the Pixie Hollow and fairy world that comes out of it, which is fairies kind of like living at kind of like this great big mother tree.
Yeah, fairies are very connected to trees and tree symbols.
Yeah, all the time. There's fairies in Enid Blyton's Enchanted Woods series. There's fairies here, and they often have trees as homes or live in other natural things like mushroom houses, which is an adorable concept, or, you know, making like little like trolleys out of acorns. You know, very, very resourceful. And I'm pretty sure in Pixie Hollow and in like the surrounding media that there's kind of like this hierarchy of like the queen fairy gets to live at the top of the tree, which I think is very fun. And kind of in that way we see like tree as a transition to power, or as a transition to like magical power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about Captain Hook's ship? Like, is there anything on that? And
I don't think so, but that is kind of like the place of the battle between Pan and Hook. And, you know, Peter Pan, I think, eventually wins because of his not so much like magical ability, but like his like belief in self, whereas Hook has like doubts, doesn't want to climb the mast to fight Pan, who's doing it with one hand tied behind his back. So like, you know, you've kind of got that like cocky confidence. Coming out in full steam.
Yeah. No, I was just interested to know because it's a boat which is made of wood, and I was wondering if there was some connection.
No, but I do think eventually they douse it with pixie dust to take that boat back
that's
to
so
the mainland.
True. Yeah.
And that dousing it in pixie dust is the transition from, you know, once you defeat the adult, then the children can fill it with magic and take it. Yeah, take it home. Drop all the children, the darling children off safely.
Oh, Peter Pan is another one of those gorgeous stories that I think is timeless.
Yeah, it's stunning. Yeah. Other timeless stories?
Yeah, another one I thought of is Jack and the Beanstalk, because I wanted to try and mention a very old English fairy tale to sort of show how far back this goes in Western culture. So I think it was around like 1700s where you saw these kinds of stories. I don't know when the first Jack and the Beanstalk was published.
Probably really hard to trace.
Yeah. So most of us would know this story. Jack plants magic beans that he got from a guy by trading the cow that grows into a massive towering beanstalk that reaches up into the clouds. And so the transition is this giant tree allows Jack to transition into a fantasy world
from the real mundane world he's trying to escape.
Yeah. Exactly. And then at the end, he has to cut down the beanstalk to stop the giant from reaching the town.
Yeah, and in doing so, he's kind of like choosing responsibility, his real life, his family. Yeah, and detaching himself from the fantastical possibilities that are.
But sad that he had to kill nature to do that.
Yeah. If only he had like a giant pair of secateurs and could cut like really high, so there's still like a really cool beanstalk. Yeah. I wanted to go kind of like transition from that really old English story to a book series that is my favorite of all time, Percy Jackson. And I wanted to talk about Talia as a tree. This is going to contain a few spoilers for the series. But they've been out for like 10 years.
So you're taking too long.
Yeah, so this is your spoiler alert. So Talia is a human-ish character. She's a demigod. She's like half Greek god, half human.
Yeah.
Who gets turned into a tree.
Yep, as you do.
As you do. Percy Jackson firmly rooted in Greek Roman mythology and blendings in between. I think turning people into trees was like just is kind of very, very of that world. Like a lot of the mythology is, you know, nature spirits kind of like turn themselves into trees to get away from pursuers. That's a really kind of like well-known routine. In Percy Jackson, Talia is a character who sacrifices her life to save her friends. And in doing so, she kind of like, it has a hero's-ish death. But her father's like, oh, that's kind of my fault. Maybe I should have protected her a little bit more. I'm going to turn her into a tree. So
that's the solution.
He's like, so sorry I couldn't help you live. Now you're a tree. And yeah, she, as a tree, protects this camp of young demigods, kind of giving like a magical barrier force field to the camp, protecting everyone from within it. And this works really well for a long period of time, until this character gets poisoned, which which makes the transition from safety to danger more apparent. Like there isn't kind of like a buffer between those two things anymore. With like her magical force fieldiness kind of coming down, it puts everyone in danger. You don't have that space to be, you know, learning camp activities, which include like, you know, like fighting and all the rest of it. In this world, you don't like have a chance to be free of the monsters. So it's kind of getting rid of that physical barrier, that physical transition. So this magical quest mythological adventure quest has gone on to find the Golden Fleece, to stop the tree from dying. And the Golden Fleece does such a good job. Not only does it stop the tree from dying, but now that person who almost died is back to life, and she's very confused because time has passed for everyone else, but not for her.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So she turns back into human.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so you would experience time differently as a tree.
Yeah.
Correct?
So that happened for her, very confused. Everyone else had to transition to understand that she was no longer, you know, like a demigod who was living. She did not. Very confused by everyone's perceptions of her. Thought she was still kind of, you know, fighting for her life. So she was kind of put in a hold transition period as a tree.
Yeah.
And I guess I kind of wanted to go back to this like thought of the borders around the camp protecting the young demigods with the idea from Peter's book that trees care for and protect their young.
Yeah, it's so wholesome.
But this is also like in a way that stops them from physically growing up because of the amount of light that can't come down from the canopy. And it's kind of like this image of kind of like older mother trees saying, not yet, bide your time, you know, get wider instead of taller, you know, put down really strong foundations, work on your roots, keeping them in this state of hold or in this state of transition until the parental tree topples and there's space for them to take up in the canopy. So it's kind of in the same vein of campers trying to make it to this middle point and not dying before adolescence. And then eventually, once they want to leave the camp, they can choose to push past, and they choose when that transition happens to allow them to leave the protective camp where they can metaphorically grow and reach out to the top of their own canopy. Yeah.
Wholesome trees.
Wholesome trees. Another tree we see as transition is the wood in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah.
Now, this is a pretty complex one, and I don't think I fully can represent the lore to which this beautiful world is crafted.
You know a lot more than me, though. I've just seen the movie.
It's sensational. So The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, The Chronicles of Narnia, this book series goes deeper than just, you know, the two, I think, movie stories that were turned into movies. It starts with this story called The Magician's Nephew. And there's a quote from chapter 3 of this book that says, "The wood was very much alive." And this is talking about a place called the wood between the worlds. And this is a mysterious realm of kind of portals, so kind of like little pools is what they're represented by.
Yeah, okay.
That allows magical travel between the worlds of Charm, Earth, and Narnia, which we come to know and love through the other stories. It kind of looks like a really quiet forest with, nothing around, very peaceful, dotted with many really big or wide pools, I guess, of water, each of which is a portal to a different world.
Huh.
Through the magician's nephew, there's a whole bunch of crazy shenanigans trying to understand how these portals work, how this wood works.
Yeah.
Eventually something not sensational happens to the wood, but I'll leave that for readers to discover.
And so this is what the wardrobe is made out of, this wood?
Yeah, so a character takes an apple from this world wood transition.
Yeah.
It's not a magical fruit, it's just an apple. But Diggory, the character, plants it on Earth, and it was a beautiful tree for many years until it blew over in a storm. And this character now, unable to transition back through those portals, back to the wood between the worlds, sees the tree blown over and can't bear to part with this last remaining kind of like image of his adventure. So he has the tree cut into firewood. Oh no, he can't bear to have the tree cut into firewood. So he has it cut into timbers and he turned it into the wardrobe to be put in his old house in the country. And I think there's like a throwaway line in there but that's a different story for another book. Mm-hmm. And then I think 3 or 4 books later, we come to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where the wardrobe is activated by Lucy.
Yeah, wow. I never realized that there was so much lore behind
There's
the wood.
so much lore.
And you've only just scraped the surface, right? That it's like even more complex than this.
So these are books that I read when I was 12.
Yeah.
So I had to go back digging to try and like jog the memory, but I'm sure there's a lot I'm missing out. I guess the biggest transition here that I wanted to make was not only, these physical like portals, is that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that specific story is about the transition from childhood through the war into adulthood.
Yeah.
And children being sent away to the country like as if they were entering a magical realm of Narnia and having to deal with everything and coming out the other side with trauma that adults can't see because it was different to their own. I think it is a sensational work. I love that the author of this was friends with Tolkien and they used to have written exchanges.
No way.
It was so funny. Tolkien was like, why do you have a lamppost? There's no electricity in your magical world. Until
critiquing each other's fantasy world.
But they were big supporters of each other too, which I really like because, we get to talk about both in this Magical Trees episode. Yeah. Trees as transition. You're transitioning from childhood through adulthood through the wardrobe that is made of the magical wood from the place in which you can teleport through worlds.
Love that interpretation of the book because I grew up being taught it was all about the Bible.
Oh. I'm pretty sure the author was very, very religious.
Yeah, so there are definitely like themes and symbols that are similar to that. But I think what you've just pointed out is way deeper and more the message, far closer to the message of the story.
Does it resonate with you more? Like
for sure.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. So that was also kind of an example of trees producing a magic product.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So let's go more into that.
Please, let's go.
So one that I know about. Okay. So I haven't read this series, but my dad loves it. And I thought it was a good one to give as an example, which is Robin Hobb's fantasy books set in the realm of the Elderlings. And in some of the books, they have these live ships. They're called live ships, which are made partially from a log material called wizard wood.
I love that.
And they're known for their sentience, which they achieve after 3 members of their family die aboard the ship, which is depressing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but and then I think, this might be incorrect because again I haven't read the books, but I think it retains the like memories of those.
Oh wait,
members.
no, that's sweet again.
So it's like it's kind of sad, but also kind of nice.
Kind of going back to the Avatar.
Yeah,
example
well then,
too.
and everybody, the rest of the family members on the ship can still have that connection to past
Yeah, and
family
hopefully
members.
don't die aboard as often because now they have like a magical sentient ship helping them.
So the properties of wizard wood also make it immune to the damaging effects of something called the Rainwild River, which is an acidic
Oh,
river. Don't want to fall overboard on that.
no, I'm okay actually.
And actually, I've heard there's a lot more to Wizardwood, but apparently it's a spoiler. So I didn't want to read more about it, and we are leaving it there because I'm thinking about reading this series.
This is also a teaser for any of our listeners who think they might want to pick up the book series. We haven't spoiled it. It's still there for you to go and discover.
Yeah. Also, another big one with magic products made from wood is Harry Potter.
Absolutely. And Harry Potter, for all its flaws, I think is a really, really good example of magic wood and trees relation, to magic even beyond the point of them being trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to talk about the broomsticks.
Let's talk about broomsticks.
So the flying broomsticks, I want one of them, are imagine how much easier it would be to get around. Are a magical wooden item with built-in charms, which is what allows wizards and witches to use them to fly around the place.
So the wood itself doesn't come magical, but there are additions made to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But wands are a little more interesting.
Yeah.
Because they're quasi-sentient tools. Hence, the wand chooses the wizard.
Such a good line.
Yeah. So they're made from many different kinds of wood and an accompanying magical substance at its core, like unicorn hair, a dragon, heartstring. No two wands are alike, so each one is unique and special to the person who is using it.
Even when they're very similar, and you kind of see that between Harry Potter and Voldemort, who have very, very similar wands. Like their wands are distinct, but they have that connection.
Yeah. So there are various kinds of wand woods, which all have different properties. So, and I've read from Ollivander's notes. I'll give some examples. Dogwood wands are quirky and mischievous. So they have a playful natures and insist upon partners who can provide them with scope for excitement and fun. And then ones made of English oak demand partners of strength, courage, and fidelity. And there are so many more kinds.
Yeah. I also find really interesting the idea of wand ownership and how you can earn a wand's trust or loyalty by defeating its original owner.
Yeah.
And then it will like bend its will to you because it's like, oh, I see you. You're pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So quasi-sentient indeed.
Mm-hmm.
In Harry Potter, we also see some sinister trees. I think very, very famous case of this is the Forbidden Forest, where no one is allowed to go unless you are naughty, and then you do detention in the Forbidden Forest. I have questions about that.
I think sometimes you can have some of the magical creature lessons are taught there too, I think, but only in a like really specific part.
Yeah. You were bad, so go walk in this forbidden place at night.
That's your punishment.
Hello.
Go get more oxygen in this forest.
And the other really famous one is the Whomping Willow, which we see in book 2 absolutely biffs the heck out of the magical flying car. Is a bit of a nightmare, and essentially it's kind of protecting the inside of the Whomping Willow, which is also like kind of spooky, Halloween-y, used as a transformation place for Remus Lupin the werewolf. Yeah,
so I guess it's also sort of a transition, like trees' transition too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So the Whomping Willows are violent, very violent, sentient species. And And as we know, they attack anything that comes within range of its branches, which function kind of like arms.
So there are other examples of sinister trees. Trees
Totally.
used, I don't know, against sinisterness too, which a lot of the other examples are. I'll briefly touch on the Shannara Chronicles, where there's a central image of a tree that protects everyone until tree is unwell, and its protectors are all dead. Like this is a society in which the tree does so much good that the best of the society protect the tree.
Right. Was this a like prominent feature in the TV show?
Yeah,
because I'm interested to know what it's actually like in the book series, because it's a very loved fantasy book series. Yeah, which apparently the TV show did not do it justice.
The TV show was a little bit trashy, and I did stop very quickly. And I was explaining it to my housemate actually, and I was like, "Yeah, this weird series, I don't think I'm going to continue it." And she was like, "I've never heard of it." And then I talked about the tree, and she was like, "Wait, I know the tree."
I know what you're talking about.
So I thought that was really funny. Your example, Isabel, of
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, that was amazing, the connection you made.
Yeah, so it's actually a little different in the novel compared to the movie adaptations. So in the novel, which I haven't read, but they're called fighting trees.
Whoa.
Yeah, which are ancient tree beings whose job is essentially to keep intruders out of the enchanted forest that is behind them. And they have human-like traits, including really thick, flexible branches that are sort of like arms and fingers, and their bark resembles human faces that allow them to see and hear. And in the book, Tin Man fends them off with his axe. But it's very different in the Judy Garland movie.
Yeah.
So in that movie, they're apple trees, and it's a little more like humorous, but they're still kind of a bit creepy looking, and sinister. And they get mad at Dorothy for taking fruit off them and attack her by like throwing apples at her.
What are the trees going to do with the fruit? Maybe she'll go spread the seeds somewhere. You should be thanking her. Another example of kind of more sinister trees, I think, I don't know, kind of less, kind of more scary than those examples. They vary between the adaptations. Is Tashi, the book series.
Yeah, I remember this series.
Yeah, there's this one, Tashi and the Demons, where the quote is, luckily Tashi was clever enough to keep his eyes shut and to trick the demons into throwing him into the dragon's blood tree. So
God damn, the dragon's blood tree.
Dragon's blood tree. It's an actual tree. It's a colloquial name for an actual tree that the author was inspired to write about after seeing it at the Botanic Gardens, which is really cool. This dragon blood's tree looks really kind of like old, wizened, all entwined, like the branches are all, coming out, meeting each other in different places. And Tashi kind of, convinces the demons to throw him in there, and then Tashi knows the secret of how to get out of the tree, and the demons are like, ha ha ha, we've been demons and awful and sinister, because the tree is really bad.
Yeah, okay.
But Tashi, who has knowledge of the tree, is able to eventually get out when it's safe. Yeah. And maybe the demons come in after him once they realize he's getting through it. And I think maybe they get stuck forever. Oh, because they don't know the tree secret. So the tree, I don't know, I think the tree as a child, you think it's sinister. Yeah. But the tree is just a tree.
It's just a tree, so it's just behaving like it doesn't know better,
Yeah. Which, I think is interesting with the perspective of the start of Peter's book when we're talking about insects nibbling on leaves, which makes the tree turn the leaves bitter. Like, I wonder if this tree does have a reaction to try and make it a bit harder to get out if someone's in its branches. And the final kind of sinister question mark story I wanted to touch on is that of the Giving Tree.
Okay.
Which is a very well known and loved picture storybook. about a tree that gives shade and apples and a swing to this little boy, and tries to take care of him all as he grows up. And I think it's sinister because it's kind of a story about giving too much of yourself to another person. You know, it ends with the boy turned into a man has now taken branches to keep himself warm, build a fire, or maybe build a house, and then takes the whole trunk of the tree to turn into something else, and then sits on the stump and is like, I still want more, but there's nothing the tree can give him.
Yeah, that's definitely a story about taking too much from nature.
There's a blog post called Why I Hate the Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein.
Well, that person feels very passionately about that.
That argues that the book encourages selfishness, narcissism, and codependency, which is interesting from the perspective of trees prefer it when they're in community and they will help each other, and it was that the person wasn't helping the tree.
Yeah. It's a two-way thing.
Yeah, the community fell down because it's just one person providing the community. Yeah, so that's like a bit of a sad ending.
No, we're gonna bring it back to positivity.
Yes.
That is my job, is to end on positive. So trees are clearly important to us.
Absolutely.
And we've seen this reflected in their diverse representation and symbolism in pop culture and science. And I think deep down it seems instinctively we know that there's more to them. And that is reflected in the text that we've talked about. It's taken a long time for science to get there.
It's taken a long time for science to, I think decide to look into it, but that doesn't mean our connection hasn't always been there.
Yeah. And so I want to talk about our personal special trees because I have a special tree. I'm going to assume you probably have a special tree too.
Of course I have a special tree.
Yeah. So my one is the cherry tree we have in our garden that we planted about when we first moved into this house over 10 years ago now. And it's special to me because I have essentially grown up with it.
Yeah.
And it's like every year I get to watch the cycles it goes through spring, winter, autumn, summer, and the way it changes. And I just feel really connected to it, I think, because of the time that it was planted. And it was like a new beginning for us as a family as well, moving from Sydney to Canberra.
Oh, that's so sweet.
What's your special tree, Ella?
Other than the fact that my initials are elm, which is a type of tree.
Oh my God, true.
I really enjoy that. I think I'd never change my name because of that. It's so nice. I also grew up with a very special tree in our family home back in Victoria, which we actually just sold last year. And this is a mulberry tree. And it was kind of at the front of our garden. It had a little circular hedge around it. Yeah, every year it provided us with mulberry berries. And what we didn't take, which obviously wasn't very many. There was a lot left over. We didn't take very many. Birds would have, and then mulberry leaves are actually some of the only leaves silkworms can eat. So whenever our school was doing a silkworm life cycle project, we'd be the family to help provide the leaves to keep them alive, so we could see that natural cycle take place in school, which is really cool. And then eventually, when I grew up a little bit and my body decided it wouldn't eat fruit, mulberries were one of the only fruits that I could eat because they're berries.
Oh my God.
There you go. That was super exciting. And even when we sold our house last year, that was kind of the name associated with it because it's one of the first things you see when you walk in. Which is really sweet. I think there's something about a tree that has seen you grow up. Yeah. As you've seen it be there for you.
Oh my God, I'm getting really emotional right now. Trees are special.
Trees are special.
Everybody go hug a tree now.
Go forest bathing.
I love that phrase.
Have you heard of it?
No.
It's where you kind of walk into a forest and you spend some time just in there to be in there. And there's meditation techniques or things you can listen to, but it's just best if you walk into it and just let nature I don't know, heal you, soothe you, relax you.
There you
bathe it
go.
in.
Everybody, that was a bonus culture snap for you.
Bonus culture snap indeed. With love from the two of us. Oh, what an episode.
Aw, it really is a podcast hug.
I feel all warm and glowy.
Yeah.
Should we do some individual sections?
Yeah. Ella, tell me about trees and X-Men.
Okay, so we're going into this metaphorically. We're talking about family trees.
Okay.
And the X-Men family tree is huge and unruly. And all the symbolism between like the unruly and the intertwining branching structure of like this family tree is compounded because it's also like a found family. It's not necessarily like mothers and fathers to daughters and sons to cousins to great aunts to uncles. It's people who have similarities, who choose to be connected. So you have kind of like all those interesting differing connections to each other as well. Yeah, like trees who help supplement each other even when some of them are sick or have been girdled, which is where their bark is stripped off, and it's a way that foresters kind of like let some trees die is by taking away a section of it, and then the tree itself will eventually sicken and fall. We know that they don't always die because sometimes they have support from other trees. And yeah, this support, I think, is really central to humans and humanity. Because I think humanity is represented by the bonds we have to each other. And I think every time an individual lives despite survival of the fittest, you know, each time a community provides support, we see something so beautiful and so human. And in this way, I think trees really are quite human. And I think it's that support that represents the community and represents connection. I think that is the longing we see when we see them. And mutants are always in that grey space between what is human, what is humanity. Can we be human without being human, which is how much humanity do we have? And I think we can ask the same question of trees, like how much humanity do they have? Which I think we've discovered is quite a lot.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Ella.
It's my little spiel. Isabel, I'm really excited about yours. So this comes from, I got us some books for Christmas.
Yeah, Ella did a really wholesome thing. And so first of all, the Hidden Life of Trees book, which we have talked about so many times in this episode, she bought it for both of us so we can both read it. Friendship read. And then Ella also bought me the plants edition of the First Knowledges series,
which is such a great series. And I think there's still one or two more to be published. Like they're still coming out.
Oh, great! Because this is the only one I've read, and I need to go read all the other ones before the next one comes out. So in this episode, we've talked all about forest science and magical tree symbols in Western texts. And in Western thought, the difference between animals and plants and the lower status of plants has been a defining characteristic pretty much since Aristotle defined animals as those who move and plants as those who don't. But it's very different in indigenous science. And while Western science were only just realizing the true complexities of the experiences, behaviors, and intelligence of trees through wonderful people like Peter Wohlleben, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures have always understood plants in this way.
And we're just catching up.
Yeah. So First Nations peoples embrace nature's intricacies and interconnectedness. Trees and humans are far more similar than different and are equals in their cultures, which is like what we're only just figuring out in Western culture. And the relationship, importantly, is one of coexistence, not codependency. Trees also possess personalities and wisdoms that are different to human personalities and human wisdom. So they have their own body of knowledge that is shaped by the view of a living world made up of many beings who speak in many voices. Wow. Yeah. And plants are also prominent in Indigenous art motifs, which shows how they're strongly tied to human identity. So, for example, in some Indigenous Australian artworks, yams are depicted as human forms and also vice versa.
Oh, so humans depicted as yams.
Yeah.
Interesting. I see a lot of artwork called like yam dreaming. Yeah.
There's lots of tree ones as well, which are like tree songline type art.
Oh, the first one in the Indigenous First Knowledges series is Songlines, and it's a great read. I'll lend it to you. It's awesome.
Oh, thanks, Ella. Super keen.
All about Indigenous knowledge systems and how everything is entwined, which I think this example is talking about too. I think there's a lot to learn from entwining our knowledge practices together.
Totally. Yeah.
A lot to learn from knowledge that has been around for forever. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing, Isabel. I'm glad you like the books.
That's okay. I loved them. Let's talk about some questions for our audience.
Yeah. I'd love to know, kind of listening to all of that on this episode, if our listeners, if you think that trees are intelligent or maybe even sentient. Yeah.
I'm convinced they are, but I want to hear what everyone else thinks. Also, what other symbols or metaphors of trees have you seen in pop culture?
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty we missed as we kind of mostly focused on books. But
it's so big. This was a very big episode. We could keep going. I could give you more tree examples if you like.
And I think we'd also like to know if there's a tree that's special to you. You can let us know on our socials at @sci_burst, Instagram, Twitter, now on LinkedIn, YouTube.
Oh yeah, we are on YouTube.
We are on YouTube. Yeah, hit us up. We love to hear your thoughts.
Yes. Stay nerdy, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thank you to ANU CPAS for their support and access to their podcast studio.